And welcome to Let the Bible Speak, where that's what we want to do. We want to let the Bible speak. There are a lot of different voices in this world. What are you laughing at?
I feel like we're on a date.
I'm connected to you.
I feel like we're on a date.
It's very nice.
This is the low, what is it? Low investment, first date where you're like, we'll have coffee.
Yeah.
You know, this is like we met online.
John, for some reason, cannot handle change.
I don't like change.
He does not like change. So anytime our seating arrangements are changed, he's like,
oh,
can't
I'm
deal
in
with
John's
it.
seat?
No.
Oh,
No.
Oh, you're good. You're
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
He just the setup change, which I love because I'm like, yeah, find the right one. Like,
For sure.
Keep trying until you get there, you know? And John's like, no, we need to get it right the first time and then leave it.
Yeah.
And don't do that. So I interrupted my whole spiel in the beginning.
Well, I guess I interrupted it by laughing.
Yeah, you
in your
did.
face.
Well, I
And it
actually,
wasn't
when you
I
started
was-
laughing, I thought maybe he's laughing at how bad he did the intro when I wasn't here. Do you remember that?
Shots fired. Like right across the bow. Like, what is going on? You know what? I think I did a fine job.
You did. No, I
mean, the wheels
after
came
that,
off as I kept talking,
At the
but-
beginning, but after that. So if you've never listened to us before, we're not a Bible study, but what we mean by let the Bible speak is we want the Bible to speak out of our lives. God hasn't given us the Bible just to be read and studied. That's a great thing to do. But it's, in fact, for us to hear his word and to put it into practice.
Yeah.
And so I'm one of your hosts, Josh Elder. Alongside me,
Across from you.
across from me,
Well, they're so particular.
is Mr. John Chetta.
Hello.
And then we have a special guest, Cynthia Weedlitz.
Oh, no, Widlets. Good
Widlets?
try.
Okay.
Yes, the worst
John's
I've ever,
going to kill me
the
for
worst
that.
I've ever gotten was
amazing.
wildlife.
Wildlife?
And it doesn't speak to anything else except they mispronounced
Widlets.
my name. Widlets.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, Widlitz.
Widlets.
And what's funny is I've known that last name for like 12
wow.
years, a long time. We were talking about Cynthia's son was in a basically like small group that was my first experience, first of all, with like teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was
As
like,
a pastor?
as a pastor.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, man, it's
It's
hard out there.
It's different.
It's hard. He was great though. He really was. And but you had different characters in there and I was like, this is why I'm not a youth
So you know that
pastor.
I am in a sense our youth pastor.
Oh, is it hard?
I run our youth group. Like I'm the one who goes back to and
Well, you're immature enough.
that's not what I like to think of.
Right.
And I'm short, so I kind of I blend.
Right.
No.
You're one of us.
Yeah, exactly. We represent
Maybe
I,
they should find a different youth pastor based on that.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
No, we for a while at least I'm going to be doing it. But it's definitely a learning curve because I'm used to preaching and talking with
Adults.
people my age or much older,
Right.
and so sometimes I have to like realize that I might be going a little too.
Literally, they give you 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Oh,
If you-
really? It's
yeah.
that short? The
Oh,
attention span?
and it's
Well,
and I'm like, shut
I mean,
up,
when
please.
you're-
I'm trying to talk about Jesus.
especially when you're dull.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that is part of my issue.
And what's monotonous?
Tonal.
Yeah, atonal.
Atonal. Thank you.
No,
That's right.
I was reading a Barna study recently. I think I probably talked about it a while ago on the podcast, but I found it interesting talking about youth. Is that the youth are like running back to the church right
yeah.
now?
yeah.
And I say the church, not necessarily like
Not
church
when I was
proper.
involved with them, but now.
Right? Yeah. Once
now.
Josh was finished with them, they were like, "Now we'll go."
Now we'll go
The
back.
big guys out, we'll go.
That's
But it said that what they seek more than anything is authenticity.
Mm.
And that's
That makes sense.
and it's why, and I'm not calling out our brothers and sisters in the church world, but many of them don't find their home in churches for that reason,
Yeah.
because they feel an inauthenticity,
Yeah.
which is a hurdle I think you and I certainly are trying to clear. Is like show your warts, show your scratches and scars, and Be real with them.
Be honest.
And I found that approach just really not necessarily changing the way I approach them. The subject matter, and how much of my own story I'll share, I do change because I don't want to encourage them. Well, Pastor John did this and that. Well, I guess I can, I don't know. Yeah. So, but otherwise, authenticity is what they're looking for.
And how did you get?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, where was
so you
that?
got Sudafed,
okay,
and you mixed
added
it with,
that with
and boiled it. What?
Don't give any tips.
Right.
No tips. No tips for the kids.
But John and my husband and I were talking about different generations, and do you think, as we look at, we started our family later in life. So as we look at them, when we have a conversation with them and they look at us like we have no clue what we're talking about because we're so old, quote unquote old. And when they left, I said, do you think our parents thought about us the same way we think about them? And he said, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I remember my mom saying, oh, okay, go ahead and try that then.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember my mom saying something very similar to that.
Same thing, just one generation to the next.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's a repeated cycle. It seems like.
Or family curse, whatever you want to however you want to look at it.
Yeah, I remember when Joseph became a teenager, that's when I realized, oh, he now thinks I'm the dumbest human being alive. The day before, I had some sort of intelligence,
I've seen it with my youth group.
Really?
Like when they were, and I've only been at this church for like 3 years, but when I started with them, I was, I could do no wrong. They wanted to know what I thought. They wanted to hear me. Now it's like
you're old news.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I have a great relationship with them, but they definitely, I don't think they think I'm that smart.
They see things differently.
Yeah, for sure.
And I mean, authenticity. I do think, like, just to speak to the church world before we talk to Cynthia about her story, because that's why she's here.
Well, 100%.
Yeah, we'll just continue to do this.
We invited
podcast.
Cynthia.
We just wanted
we
you
invited
to
Cynthia to be our audience.
To give you the whole.
So far, so good.
Exactly.
Josh and I can't converse without an audience.
Yes,
so
we're very, very self-interested. I don't remember what I was going to say. Oh, yes, I do. So I was thinking about what you were saying about authenticity with the church world. And I have noticed, I do think that the church world has had difficulty understanding that authenticity is such a high ethic for people to come to the church, that it's not like it maybe used to be. I think there was a time. So Seeker Sensitive is a good example of this, where they would construct the church around giving you what you want, as far as like, and it's not giving you what you want, but it's like speaking to you in your language that draws you in so that you will become a Christian. But there's a problem with that mindset, I think, a little bit, that has not been really made clear, and it's that there's an inauthenticity to that.
Yes.
In other words, if you're always going, yes, we're going to react always to you.
Yeah. What
that stops you from doing is showing who you really are.
Right.
And the person becomes the product.
Yes.
And so then I think that's an issue. And I think the church is starting to really, I think there's a movement away from that. I don't think it's been vocalized.
Right.
I really don't think it has. But it's with that younger generation is coming to Christ in droves. And I think what they are so attracted to, because of how much inauthenticity there is in social media and everything that they possibly consume, is somebody they go, that person actually is being who they are. Like, they're being real. I think
the fact that there's truth.
Yeah.
Like, the gospel is true.
Exactly.
And there's so much that's false, and that I think young people face all the time, that's what they're looking for. It's like, oh, this is this real thing. This is true.
Don't cater to us.
I can lean on this.
Tell us the truth.
Because that's the thing I was going to say. It's not even a new agey kind of Christianity that they're after. It's like kind of what's the word? Like an orthodoxy they're looking for.
Yeah.
Like something they can like show
what
me
does it
something
mean?
real.
What does it mean to be Christian?
Right.
Well, and I think part of it too is that old saying of, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they don't. So
No.
so many times when I hear a message, and sometimes they're from you, Josh.
Yeah, that's okay.
Very
So
rare.
many times when I hear a message it'll hit home and I'll be like, oh, wow, that really does make sense. And it might be like that with our young people. They don't know it until all of a sudden they hear it, and then it does hit home.
I heard
to
a
them.
saying that you often trust people you don't know because they've never lied to you. And
I've never heard that before.
I heard it when I was a kid, and
I trust no one,
it's-
I was
including
gonna
those.
say, no.
it's stuff. Well, I think in that sense, it's
I
like,
get
have
what
you
you're
ever
saying.
noticed that like kids won't listen to you, but your
but
kids
they'll
won't
listen to
they'll
all their
Yes.
friends.
like there's
Or
this-
that older,
there's this
you
weird-
know,
or I
the
heard it
guy
on a
they think is
podcast.
cool, right?
I saw it on TV. I heard it in a
right.
podcast.
Or I heard it on
must be true.
YouTube or Instagram must be right.
And so I don't know if it's right or wrong, but that's stuck in my head is that people trust those they don't know. Like they're more inclined to take the word of somebody they've never met because why would this person lie to me? They haven't lied to me before. I don't know if it's actually true, but
Right.
there's some of it that feels true to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And so yeah, I think the authenticity. I mean, I say it all the time. It's the most valuable currency we have, and in order to get young people, I know we're not supposed to be really talking about this, but being authentic and being honest with them, I think is the way to go because they have heard so much on TikTok. They keep hearing all these messages that from people they don't know that might be right, might be wrong, but if they had somebody in the church that they trusted, somebody that was authentic, I think that makes a big difference.
This is going to be my first book. My first book is going to be on
Your first book is
authenticity.
going to be a coloring book.
Claimsies. I claims it now.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
That's
all
how
right.
this works.
Okay.
And nobody else can write it.
Okay, so
Because
tell
I said
everybody
it.
what it's going to
Tell
be.
everybody,
What's the
copyright.
title?
It's going to be
Somehow I manage.
No
Now
clue.
I can't stop laughing. Sorry. You're going to have to
All right.
delay.
So, but
Yes.
I say that because Cynthia, you are writing a book.
Yes, I am.
And
Nice.
in the
segue.
process, when it comes out, you tell us, and we'll start telling everybody about it.
Good.
And we'll
Good.
be like, "You've got to read this."
Now, have you written a book before?
No, I have
So is
not.
the book that you're working on, is that, I feel like I saw something when I was, learning, preparing, which
you
I,
prepared?
bro, you don't know.
Whoa.
I'm a
He heard it
professional.
was going to be me.
That's
that
it.
was
And I
it.
was
He was
like,
impressed.
Thank
He
you.
was
high
impressed.
stakes.
Thank
you
you.
know?
High stakes.
I had to, No
Yeah.
offense to our previous guests. It's just,
Everyone in 125 episodes, but anyway.
Well, you know what? I'll save that question. Never mind.
Oh, really?
Well, I was gonna
You
because
did this
I
whole
noticed.
thing.
Like, I think I saw a cover of a book. Is that,
She actually, I will probably use that.
Okay,
The people,
okay.
my team who built my website
Okay.
designed that cover. She
Nice.
designed
It
my
looked great,
logo.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
I know, I love it.
It looks
and I'm
great.
like, this is awesome. Like, I'll use that.
Yeah.
Yes, I love
okay,
it.
cool.
Why
okay.
complicate it if it looks
Right,
good?
right. And it's
Yeah.
very simple.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So
they did a
okay,
good
so
job.
tell us. I mean, I know. So you're going to be writing, but tell us a little bit about your story, and because I know you have kind of a testimony, and even the title of your book has something to do with that, and so tell us a little bit about your story and your relationship with God. How did
Well, the biggest part was it's so hard for me to even give the Reader's Digest. I'll say I had
you don't
my
have to? We got
Yeah,
all
that's
the
long
time
form.
in
You
the
got it.
world. Yeah.
I had my first open heart surgery when I was just 37 years old, and it was
Wow.
5 months after my son was born.
Wow.
And my husband and I didn't originally plan to have children. We didn't like children. I still
Makes sense.
say,
Oh yeah,
Still
totally
don't.
get it.
I
I
say
totally
you
get it.
have 5.
Yeah,
I don't know
right.
about you, John.
I tried to
Two,
like
yeah.
one of them. No, just kidding.
And I still say I don't do well with OPK, other people's kids.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But we did. So I had convinced him, so to speak. He had agreed to have a child. And here, 5 months later, I had to have open heart surgery. And I
Why was that? Was it just
my
like a
mitral valve in my heart had ruptured
wow?
Okay.
and needed to be repaired
Okay.
before it killed me.
Yes.
So at that point in time, my son's 27. At that point in time, the surgery had a 50-50 chance of success.
And you had your child by
means
this
half.
time?
He was 5 months old.
5 months old.
So then my husband faced raising this child, our son, all by himself.
Yes. And that is the most frightening thing for a
Oh, I
husband
can't imagine.
in the possible
Still has trouble with it.
Yes. Thinking
And he's
that it might
27.
ever have to just rely on me. I certainly
in trouble.
am not. Yeah,
yes,
you're in trouble.
Yes. So we all prayed through that experience, and it wasn't the significance, because we spoke earlier about the significant feeling experience. And I had a faith. I still have a faith. My faith was different then because the experience didn't hit home with me like my others did. And then 19, my son was 19, and I had to have emergency open heart surgery. I call it my medical adventure.
Was it still like the same thing?
No,
or-
this time I had what you call an aortic dissection, which is where there's a tear in your aorta, the largest artery.
that's not good.
In the body, right? If it ruptures, it'll kill
That's
you.
it. Yep.
So it had just happened. I had just started my consulting business, and I was sitting on the couch eating, and I felt something was wrong when I swallowed, and neither my son nor my husband were home. Couldn't get a hold of them because my husband keeps his phone on vibrate like both of you do, and didn't know I was calling.
Yeah.
So the ambulance showed up before he did, took me to a hospital, kept me for 3 days, sent me home and said, "We can't find anything wrong with you."
Wow.
Still felt really bad. Went to another doctor. He ran a CT scan. I didn't get back in my driveway before the radiologist called me and said, "Get
gotta
to the
come in."
emergency room now."
No.
And they said, "This is what you have. We need to do emergency open heart surgery." We didn't know. You take a chance. It's
Right.
like, Lord, put me in the right hands, because we didn't know who the surgeon
don't know who it's
was.
gonna
He could,
be.
just walked in, guess, like
Right.
that commercial. The
He
doctor
has
said,
a 50% success rate. Like
Right.
you got to flip a coin.
Yeah.
You don't know.
So my surgery was 9.5 hours
Wow.
long.
Wow.
So my
Was it
fam-
supposed to be that long, or did
They
it?
didn't know how long it was going to take.
They didn't know how long.
By the time they got in there, they didn't know if they were going to be able to repair it or replace it, and they had to replace it.
Okay.
So now I call it a tissue valve. I refuse to call it a pig valve.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It was a
Right?
big-
Yeah. No.
yeah,
Do
yeah.
they keep these in the freezer in case? I don't know.
I no. Yeah.
I don't want to know. I
They
didn't.
just call up
There's a
Hebrew
little
Nationals and
farm.
like,
There's a
hey, we
little
need another
farm
box.
yeah, there's a little farm at the bottom. At the bottom.
That's what that noise is in the
That's what
hospital.
it is in the hospital. And they're like, "Hey, we need one. Can you
Yeah.
get?" Anyway, we won't go too far with that.
And
one.
what is it the right size? What size was the pig? I don't-
Exactly.
Right. No. So I just think of, my whole family, my husband's family had gathered, and the whole time they're praying. It's just, you think about waiting so long
Yeah, 9
to
hours.
find out. And every here and there, they would update them on the progress of the surgery, how things were going, and the stress. I think back. I was out. I didn't have a clue what was
Yeah,
going
you were-
on,
you
but
weren't
the
stressed.
stress, and they talked about how awful it was,
Yeah.
not knowing what was going to happen, and the fear of losing your loved one. And my son was 19 at that point in time.
Goodness.
9.5 hours later, they said everything went fine. I have a new tissue valve. Well, then they found out not too long after the surgery that one tiny little stitch, when they put my new valve in, didn't heal properly
Wow.
and had created what you call a pseudoaneurysm, which is where there's a little bubble. You look like you have a medical history, John.
He
You're nodding,
wants
or
to
you
tell
just
you about it. He
pretending?
wants
No,
to
no,
tell you.
I'm just
Okay.
Have
no,
you
I'm
hold off this long?
I'm not saying
You
a
know?
word.
I
So
can't wait
tell
to
her.
hear
No, I'm not. It's fine. But I'm
teaching
familiar with it.
you.
I'm not. I just
Familiar with physiology for
yes,
many
I'm an
years.
anatomy guy.
You're an anatomy guy.
That's the easy way of saying
Yes,
it. I've
exactly.
spent 20 years studying anatomy.
Private
Oh,
education.
no kidding.
Private education.
That's it.
Yeah, it's
We'll talk more about that later.
all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had to watch it. It forms a little sac outside of your heart, and blood continues to fill that little sac. And if it grows, they get to the point where it could
It'll
rupture and
burst.
kill you.
And the same thing can happen.
Yeah, another adventure. So he continued to watch it. During that same time, I developed AFib, which is in your heart doesn't beat in rhythm like it's supposed to.
My
So
brother has that.
Over really?
Yeah.
It's torturous if they can't fix it.
Yeah.
Did they try the ablation?
I'd had an ablation twice. I had 3 or 4 cardio versions where they jump you like they do in the movies.
They put,
Yeah.
they put an old battery.
Stand back.
Yeah. Get the car.
It's just like that.
Right.
And none of them worked. And then they also went in to try to close up the pseudoaneurysm. They put what they call, it's amazing how they do this, a teeny tiny little coil. It looks like something you would whip your food with. But it's
Yeah.
teeny tiny. They put that in there hoping that the scar tissue would build up around it and close the pseudoaneurysm. None of those worked. And during 3 of those procedures, they went in through my groin, my femoral artery, which has a route to the heart. None of them worked. So the surgeon says, my surgeon who did the put in my new valve says, we need to go in a 3rd time. Now, they don't like to do that many times, and neither would I
Right.
for open heart surgery because
Right.
they have to get through the scar tissue and so forth. Well, we didn't like, we're just going to abbreviate it and say we didn't like the appearance and the communications of the specialist who would do that because each surgeon specializes in a particular procedure so they can be the very best at what they do. So we found a specialist over in Houston, and they said after running more tests, we believe we can repair this without open heart surgery. Well, when they bring the surgeon into the room, polite introductions, he looks at us and said, I have to first tell you, I believe in God. How many doctors start that way?
I love that.
Oh, man.
We got goosebumps.
Yeah, I love that.
He explained that he is not the healer, God is the healer. And
Wow.
God just simply uses his hands to do God's work.
Golly.
That was amazing. So we
Amazing.
knew we
That's
were
the-
in the
that's
right
it.
place.
Yep.
Yeah.
He was going to insert another little device that should close up the pseudoaneurysm. This was different. Go through the groin once again. Stayed overnight, sent me home. Everything was fine. Abbreviated until 4 weeks after I started bleeding so bad in that area, we couldn't stop it. Take me to ambulance. And I remember when I saw the look on the paramedics' face in the ambulance, they were thinking, what are we going to do with this? Get to the ER, and the ER doctor says the same thing. I was about to bleed to death. They knew that my situation was so dire. I had a pseudoaneurysm in my femoral artery now, which could rupture and kill me. I don't get the common cold, mind you.
Right.
Just the stuff that'll kill
Just
me.
the
And my
serious
husband,
stuff.
on the other hand, you know, if he gets a hangnail, he's laid up on the couch for 3
Right.
or 4
100%.
days, right?
He's got to put his sick hat on.
Yeah.
You know, he's got.
He doesn't eat right, doesn't take care of himself. So one teeny tiny little
Oh,
blood
yeah.
pressure
I get
pill.
that.
Yes, I get the stuff that'll kill you. So he realizes that they don't have the specialty team there to sew up my femoral artery before it ruptures. I need to be medevaced to the hospital on the South Shore. And from the moment I got my 2 paramedics, they introduced themselves. The first experience I had with them, like, oh, this is cool. No, I am screaming in pain at this point in time, and I have a high tolerance for pain. Brandon and Jean put me on the helicopter, and they are doing everything they can to keep me from bleeding to death. I can see the look. I'm on blood transfusion now.
That's
I
what I
was
would- yeah.
bleeding so badly. And they did everything, obviously, and I'll abbreviate that part. They did everything they could to keep me from bleeding to death. And that helicopter pilot, when they put me on board, recognized how dire my situation was. He radioed to the air traffic controller and got them to divert some of the other aircraft to expedite our trip to the South Shore. They got me over there, obviously, without bleeding to death. I lost 37 ounces of blood. They got me there in 16 minutes. And my paramedic said it was the longest 16 minutes of his life, hence the 16 minutes.
Gotcha.
They were
So
able
that's
to
what
That's the name of the-
that's why
yeah.
everything is 60 minutes. And I
Yeah.
coined the phrase 16 minutes. And I
for
coined the
her
phrase
book, for her book, so
Yes.
everybody's clear on it.
for my book,
Yeah.
and I speak
Yeah.
on the subject to
Okay.
share my story. I coined the phrase 16 minutes from the experience as being a pivotal event in your life where you make a life-changing decision. And I was telling you, Josh, what it was on that helicopter. I kept thinking if maybe I was screaming it was torturous, and one of the paramedics had his knee in my groin with sandbags pressing to keep me from bleeding so much. And I thought if only I could close my eyes and go to sleep, I won't feel the pain. If I could just go to sleep. And God gave me the strength not to go to sleep because I know it would have been the very last time. And as I look back, I just remember that thought. Didn't think anything else of it. But as I look back, I realized God gave me the strength not to do that because I was in such extreme pain.
Yeah, I mean, what better motivation would you need to want to go to sleep than you're in extremely terrible pain, and yet you stay awake and don't go to sleep.
No.
Yeah.
And another thing I think back on is and I tell this when I share is at no point in my, and I call it adventure, at no point in my medical adventure did I ever fear dying. Never.
That's great.
Never.
Yeah.
And there's more to the story.
Do you think that is because of your faith? That like you knew that where you were going? Or is it just you just had no fear of death?
No, I don't think you could find many people who don't have a fear of death.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just didn't think you were going to?
I didn't know. I knew that God, I could feel God there with me.
Okay.
And I say, I can't imagine people living life without knowing that they're not walking this path alone.
Yeah.
And I think those people who have that, who don't know that God is right next to us, walking us down this path, and sometimes when it's really difficult, like during that time, picks us up and carries us.
Yeah.
Right.
Depending what our challenge is that we're
Footprints in the
facing.
sand.
Right.
It's
Yes.
100%.
Yes. So no, I never fear dying, and my experience, my adventure, got more and more.
Dire.
Adventurous.
Yeah.
They
I like that you call it an adventure. I think
it could be
that's-
negative, but it wasn't because God got me through it, and He's showed me my mission, what His mission for me is through. So they stitched me up. They sent me home. Had a home health nurse come every couple of days. She discovered about 11 days later I had become septic, which will kill you. Your
It'll
body,
kill
your
you as well.
infection fighting process turns on your body. I had 103-degree fever. Back in an ambulance to the hospital. Put me on a IV of antibiotics and blood thinners, and every couple of days they did what they call a surgical washout procedure, where they put in these micro beads, antibacterial, whatever. They make up all these big words just so we
course they
can't
do.
pronounce them.
Right.
And after, I believe it was the second or third, John said it was the third, washout procedure, I just remember telling the nurse I had an excruciating headache. That was the last thing I remembered until I woke up several hours later. Half my head was shaved. I had staples down my skull, and I was wrapped in bandages. I had developed a brain bleed, and they had to surgically remove part of my skull.
Oh, and they had you on those blood thinners.
Yes.
right? They had you-
Because of the
Yeah,
blood thinners,
right.
I had developed this brain bleed.
Man.
Another opportunity I could have stroked or died.
Yeah.
God got me through that. Stayed for 2 more weeks. And then they said, oh, we're going to release you. And I said, oh, thank you, Jesus. I get to go home. They said, oh, no, you've had too much trauma on your body and your brain. You're going to a medical rehab hospital where I got to stay for 5 weeks.
Wow.
They had to helped me learn to walk again, to talk in a manner that people could understand me, to be able to write. I couldn't even read a clock. And when I got to the point where I was physically and mentally able to, I worked with physical therapists, cognitive and speech therapists. And every single therapist I worked with said, it was so nice to work with a patient who wanted to get better and would do what it took to get better. Because so many people are just perfectly content, just as is, or doing just enough to get by.
Right.
And that's when, you realize some people are okay doing just enough to get by.
Right. Right.
Maybe they're not asking God for the help because, sometimes you hear people say, if God hadn't helped me, I don't think I could have gotten through this. We've talked about some of those stories.
100%.
People are perfectly content doing just enough to get by.
Yeah. It's, it kind of reminds me of the story of the Israelites in the wilderness, like they were constantly facing trouble in the wilderness. It's the testing period, like in our lives. And they wanted to always turn back to slavery, to Egypt, or just basically would grumble and complain and would not listen to what the Lord was telling them to do. And in fact, one of the commentators who talks about, he says, it's very much like a trainer who says, if you just do these things, you're going to be okay. And that God has that relationship with us too, where he says, if you just do these things, you're going to be okay. But the problem is how many of us are not willing, how many of us are that.
Well, I think it's that we seek comfort. And so anything that stretches us is uncomfortable. And you've got people who embrace the discomfort and, Marcus Aurelius, obstacle is the way kind of thinking. And then you've got people who are like, that hurts. I don't want to do that.
Right. Like changing the
I would rather
for a podcast.
Things like that.
Real difficult things.
But adapting to podcasts, rearrangements. But you definitely see that kind of stuff in physical therapy all the time. People who just had no, some people wanted to get better because they had things to do. So I think that maybe that also might play into it. I was talking to somebody just recently. I'll just not say their name. But she messaged me because her aunt has been diagnosed with cancer, and she's in her late 70s and doesn't want to get treatment. And it's just like, I just want to go. And the person I know that reached out to me is really upset about that. And it's like, I keep telling her she needs to fight and she needs to do this and she needs to do that. And I said, you can't, I get the idea that you want to, when you see somebody run out of gas, you want to siphon your own life force and give it to them. Right. It's so painful to watch.
Right.
I said, but sometimes we just need to be with people.
Yeah.
And I pointed to Job and Job's friends, and it gives somebody a reason to live and they might fight to live.
Right.
But just tell somebody to fight. It's like if they don't have something to embrace or something to go home to or something to really, so I think that's the important thing. Like when I see people just giving up, it's like, I don't think you have the right motivation in your life. I think that's what it is. I think.
What was your motivation at the time for
my family?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to be there for my family. Well, and there's 2 points I forgot to make. We could, as my adventure got deeper and deeper, when each time they got a phone call and said, "Oh, she's got what?" We all prayed, my whole family, everybody, and our friends were praying, and then our church was praying, and then our friends' church, and we had people throughout the country praying, and y'all, honestly, we could feel the power of prayer.
Yeah.
We really could. We could feel it throughout that, and that helped us face it with the courage and the strength that we needed. And my husband had faith. And he says not to the degree that he does now, and not just because God answered his prayer the way he wanted. He said he came to trust Jesus.
Well, when you're in the valley and all you have is the shepherd.
That's it.
Right.
You learn to trust. I mean, I would hope.
Yeah, and that I mean, I think that's why they were in the wilderness.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
know,
Isn't
like-
it amazing that you had to see your medical adventures over the time and time again? It's easy to say, well, like my son, for instance, is 7 years old and has some temper issues, and I've been trying to talk to him about prayer and turn into the Lord for that. And as a 7-year-old, he can be so honest. He can be so not honest, but he can be so honest.
Yeah.
He goes, I tried it doesn't work. That's what he said to me.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I was like, what a complicated,
Yeah.
what a deep, question, thing to say. And so I was talking to him. I said, well, it might not work in your time,
Yeah.
but you don't stop talking to the Lord. Like
Yeah.
the Lord is working. It's just not in your time. And it's
Right.
okay. But the goal is to remember to turn to the Lord. And so that's what I'm trying to tell my 7-year-old
Right.
son. But I'm hearing that, and it's like, I'm sure at some point somebody's like, why are we even praying? You keep getting, this keeps happening. Like, it's not working. It's not
Right.
working. But look where you are now, and your husband's faith increased through it.
Oh my
and
goodness, yes. Yes. And it spoke to so many people who were
goodness.
affected by it. And when I speak now, I heard God tell me, I was telling Josh that, I hear people say that they heard God tell him. Like, is it really a voice or what?
Right.
And it really was. I remember when it happened, and it was a feeling, and God said, your mission, because every single doctor that I saw, my husband said, even if they were podiatrists that came into your hospital room, because I'm like, I can't believe this woman survived this. Every single doctor cannot believe I survived.
And they want to do all the studies on you and write them up
they're
and
probably
give
teaching
get
about me in
printed.
med school
yeah,
or
they're
whatever.
like, and here is
So the-
while leaving out one very important part.
yes, presented as
It was my mission is to tell my story, not just to tell my story, but to share how the impact of God, the impact of faith, and to remind people that we are not walking this path alone. And when I speak, to have somebody come up to me, and it happens, to have somebody come up to me and say, I really needed to hear that.
Yeah,
I had a man come to me one time and said, I used to go to church. And I've stopped going to church, and my wife is about to have a baby. After hearing this, I really feel like I want to go back to church.
And you were like, amazing. North Cross, 311, Highway 21.
Exactly.
I can't show preference.
Just kidding. I'm just
especially with Josh.
I'm just teasing.
Exactly.
It is amazing though that you're able to, through your experience, kind of share the gospel and inspire other people. I mean, that's what a gift that is to be able to use such a tumultuous adventure.
Well, yeah, and the recognition, like that. This is what I think of as like it's such a blessing that you've been given in this way, that the recognition of your struggle or your. And I don't like wordplay, but I'm just one of those people. But your test has become your testimony.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Your mess has become your message. And
I hadn't heard that second one.
yeah,
Now, I
remember
knew the
that
test
second
and the
one?
testimony.
You're going to steal it now?
Yeah,
Mess
yeah,
becomes
yeah.
your message.
We keep going if I can
Man.
figure out some more ones. But
going.
but the truth is like being able to recognize that the difficulty in your life of suffering was not just for the purpose of pain or anguish or anything, but instead that it increased something of great value to you,
Yes.
of faith and a walk with God, and even giving you a mission and giving you a testimony, to be able to talk to people. That's an unbelievable gift. I want you to know that that's
Yes.
a gift.
Oh,
because
it's so
absolutely.
great, and I'm trying to remember if I said this on the podcast recently or if it came out of a sermon recently, but I think never mind.
that's it.
No, it'll come back to me.
Oh my goodness, we went
Happens
blank.
all
I
the
did it
time.
again. No, it happened again. It happened last time.
You did?
Yeah, I went blank.
Just take your time.
I know.
What
no,
were you thinking?
No, I'm not
about?
going to keep everybody waiting in
here
silence.
listening, they're fine.
And they
They're
are
not-
very
they're not-
used to me
they're
not being
both
professional.
of us.
or-
I mean, both of us are nice blankers.
Say what you just said again.
I don't
Say
even.
that again.
All it is a
Yes.
blessing. It was a blessing.
Yes, it
yes,
was a
it was a
gift.
it was a gift. It's a gift because the truth is, it's
I
not
got it.
everybody recognizes.
Well,
that.
so
But
there's
God shared it with me.
Yeah.
He told me.
Yes. exactly.
And I had always wondered.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I think, I think it was a sermon that I said it recently, but like you're gonna suffer. Like we're going to suffer in
Yes,
life.
it's a fact.
It is a fact, but God can use all things for
Right.
good. You
Right.
know, for the good of those who love Him and are called
According to his purpose.
So
purpose.
if you're the Lord's and you when you suffer, there can be purpose, or something can happen from it that God can use it.
We cannot believe otherwise as Christians, because literally our whole message is about the suffering of the Son of
Right.
God that produced salvation for his children. And so literally if we're defined by a God who suffered in order to deliver, then there's going to be things in our life that are going to replicate that. I mean, that there's going to be a high level of meaning
So I
that can come from what you're speaking of, which you know better than most because of what you've gone through, you know?
a skeptic on the outside can look at that and be like, well, you believe in Jesus, but you still suffer. You know,
Yeah,
like
right.
how's that different from the guy who doesn't believe in Jesus still suffers? Well, they
Right.
are different
They are different.
because that person sadly suffers alone.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I was going to say. I don't suffer alone. I didn't suffer alone. And I recognize now I went through quite the adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it would be nice had I not had to
Had to
suffer
go
so
through
much.
it. Yeah,
Sure.
of course.
But had I not, then I wouldn't have heard God tell me what my mission was. And I wouldn't have this experience
Right.
to be able to share with people
Right.
and to let them know that God's what got us through this.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
couldn't have, I really don't, it wouldn't have been, I wouldn't call it an adventure. I would say it was a horrible experience.
Right. Right.
And my family could say it was a horrible experience.
Right.
But it wasn't.
Well, when you're on an adventure, sometimes you fight a dragon. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that's adventures have tough
right.
and painful, difficult times. And I love that you call it an adventure, though, because it is. Maybe if you didn't have the faith that you have and you weren't walking with the Lord, maybe it would have been just a tragedy, just
Right.
something real, real bad. But
Right.
I mean, the gospel's being glorified.
Yeah,
because of it.
there is a treasure that you have found at the end of an arduous, is fine, you know, like a difficult, that's an understatement, you know,
Yeah.
arduous journey, and that you have found a treasure that you might say was even worth it. Would you say that? Would you say it was the treasure that you found is worth it?
Absolutely.
And-
Absolutely.
And see, like to me, like that is one of those things that I wish everyone knew.
Yeah.
I wish they understood the treasure at the end, that there is something of great worth that really is worth. You know, like it's kind of bringing it back to the Israelites, but when they're in the wilderness, they cannot see the value of God among them. They just can't see the value of Him. And so they're constantly going their own way rather than going His way. I think if they could recognize that we're in this desert, we have no food often, we have little water often, we have all these struggles, but we have the greatest treasure
right.
that we could ever have in our lives, that would change the whole journey.
Right.
It becomes an adventure
Yes.
rather than
Yes.
just suffering.
Now, you said it a while ago, but I'm having a hard time remembering. How long ago did
You
that
have a
happen?
memory issue today.
I take
huh? Or is
I
this an
I
ongoing
take a
thing?
little gummy for that. What's it called?
I don't know.
No, it's
Yeah,
called Lion's Mane. But if you can remember to take it, you don't need to take it.
exactly.
What? How long
Timeline?
ago? How long ago did all this?
2023.
Okay.
Now my original emergency open heart was 2017.
Okay, that's the.
So
I had
it really
2017
started to
in my head.
culminate with more challenges. 20 and 20, 21, 22, that's when they started the procedures because they had watched the pseudoaneurysm grow.
I've seen people who have a miraculous healing walk away and then go back to life as if it didn't happen. You know, or they're on fire for a
too.
little while. You
Right.
know, and then
I have
just
to.
goes back. And I don't
Yeah.
know if that's like,
They
well, was it
explain
really?
it away.
Did it really? Yeah, they explain it away.
Yeah, that they'll have signs in their lives, and they'll just go, yeah, that was probably just
Right.
something else. It was
But
probably just
I
something
like that. I mean, I'm so grateful that you didn't do that, because how many testimonies of God's work goes hidden under a bushel?
I know.
It's so sad.
It is very,
Well, and
very
that
sad.
y'all can, when I tell my story, that y'all can take it. I know the Bible, but not to the extent that y'all do, to be able to take the verse, take what I say and relate it to a verse.
Yeah.
To be able to open people's eyes, because when I put this together, and there's more to my story when I publish my book, and I'll tell just a little bit about what I'm putting together in case anyone might want to share. Lost my train of thought. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I set the tone.
John,
No, I
There you
remember.
go.
There it
Okay.
is.
Okay, as
There
I
it is.
speak, when I wrote the speech originally was to speak to what I call three audiences. The first audience is the people who haven't, the wanderers in the desert, who's like, why is God doing this
Why
to
am
me?
I in this situation?
Where's this guy? They
Right.
talk about him, but he's not real. So to get those people's attention and go, wow,
Yeah.
she's still here.
Yeah.
The doctor said she shouldn't be.
Right.
Maybe I should learn a little bit more about this guy.
Yeah.
Then the second group is to the people who believe. I've heard, I've accepted him, but I really want a bit more proof.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, show me this guy really can do this stuff that you talk about. I believe,
Right.
I have faith, blah, blah. And then the final group are those who really have accepted God. They believe, they live their life like that. But to remind them that each and every day we have the opportunity through our decisions and our actions that we make and that we take to show other people every single day.
Yeah.
We can remind those people.
Yeah. Encourage each other.
Encourage each other.
Yeah.
Don't just let those people go away and,
No.
no, just to show
Yeah.
and tell the people
And
about God's
am I
love.
right that your story is also or your book is gonna highlight other people's?
Yes.
stories?
So while my story is an adventure,
Yeah. Right.
I don't want to, it's not just let me tell you my story. When you
Right,
tell a story, people are more engaged.
Yeah.
Then, oh, God, really, is it going to be? But I have points in my story, and we've talked about some of them, but it's about other people's experiences.
I think
My
that's great.
story will speak to some people. Okay, but then there are other people who have those 16-minute moments when they made a life-changing decision. And we don't just have one 16-minute moment. When
No.
we made a life-changing, there may be numerous in your life, but they have that decision. So gathering stories from people, and they're not all medically related, who had a decision that significantly impacted their life. So I'm compiling stories from each person. And
awesome.
each story will touch different people in different ways. One story is from someone who wouldn't let her son put on his driver's license he would be an organ donor.
Organ donor, yeah.
And he was killed in an automobile accident. But I interviewed a gentleman who received a heart. So that story touched this person because her nephew could have been an organ donor. He could have saved other people's lives. But the story was how it impacted that man whose donor
Yeah.
made the decision. And each story leads to a Bible verse that speaks to that particular person's story. So I'm gathering stories from other people that will speak to other people and not just my story.
Well, and I think that's great because, first of all, whenever we have something like this that's happened in our life, sharing it with others, it's what gives it permanence in some way. You know, I don't think it's an accident that the Bible was written. You know what I mean? That there would be something that we could always go back
Yeah.
to. And in a similar way, like with Christians, I mean, and John knows this, and I know this from being a pastor for a number of years, the amount of stories that are out. I mean, it's part of what we do here.
Absolutely.
You know,
Right.
part of what we do here is to put people's stories of God out there in the world, and how the Scripture has come alive in your story. How we see, all of what God has done. But there's so often people won't share, and then when they tell you, you go,
Why in the
why
world?
haven't you told
Right.
anybody that story?
I don't want to sound weird.
They'll be like,
Right.
I don't want to sound weird, or maybe they won't believe me,
Yeah.
or all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, do you need to
So
tell
I
that?
have
You
a
know what I
habit
mean?
of saying this to my congregation. I understand that it's particularly harsh, but I say, I'm like, has the Lord saved you
Yeah.
from anything?
Right.
Have you told anybody about that? Because if you haven't, you don't deserve it. Like you don't deserve it. If you hide it,
It's
and
right.
first of all, none of us
the
deserve
talent.
it.
No, but the talent. The
What are you
talent
going to
hidden
do with it?
in
Yeah,
the
don't
talent
bury
hidden.
your
Don't bury
talents.
your talent. Share it, and I think you, bringing those stories together, because as individuals, there's individuals out there who haven't lived this experience, and they haven't lived our experience, and so for them, they might think that the whole world is a world where everybody's in the desert, but there is no God to help them out.
Right.
There's no God to get them out of that. And they believe that because they don't hear the cry that comes across the nations, across the peoples, of saying, no, my God was here in the wilderness and he delivered me, and he will deliver you too. And so it's one of the things that combats that hard-heartedness, that being where something has occurred, but it can't be God and all this kind of stuff. But when you start to hear it everywhere.
Right.
Yeah, I think the more that we hear of God's work in people's lives, the better we get to know God.
Yeah.
Because you always see the connective tissue between people's stories, and I feel like I think it helps us realize that the person, or the three persons of God, like
Right.
it's that there are even predictable action. There's the Lord works in the Lord's way, but I see consistency when I hear people tell stories about when the Lord shows up for them and how the Lord intervenes in their life. There's not that I don't hear that one off that's like really yours, for instance, your conversion story.
Yeah.
I've only heard once before, and I think it happened to Bill Wilson, the person who started Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
With the bright light and the
Well, there was actually, not to change the subject, but an apologist named Amy Orr Ewing.
Mhm.
So
I like her.
this broke me down so bad. And once again, it was a story that she was telling. So her father was an atheist, and in fact, he'd come from a family of atheists, and was not allowed to talk even about religion in his household.
Wow.
Because his dad was like, none of that foolishness. You're not going to talk about that. And he and her mother were intellectuals. They were all this kind of stuff. But she's telling this story. I'm listening to her tell it from the stage, and then she says, and then one night, the light of God appeared to him.
Mm.
And she started to explain the light of God exactly as I explained
Oh
it,
my goodness.
Yeah,
speaking.
that's what I'm talking
speaking
about.
to you.
Oh my goodness.
And she said, and it transformed him. He saw, and she even said it, he saw all the sins he had committed.
Just like you.
Oh my goodness.
And she's telling it, all I'm doing is crying.
Yeah.
I'm listening to this
right.
story, crying. Is speaking to your third party. Did I believe? Yes. But to hear
Yeah.
the story of God reflected in somebody else's life a generation ago that
Right.
led to the production of an apologist who goes around the world
Amazing.
speaking about Jesus.
That is amazing.
I was like, I get to hear what a second stage could
Mhm.
be
right.
of the first
Right.
of the first 16 minutes, and the other 16 minutes it can lead to. And so that really just it just encouraged me to hear it. And I wrote her. She never wrote me back.
Ah.
And not that I blame you. You know, no,
Yeah,
just-
I know
See, you
Amy's
fell under
Amy's a
Stan's
regular listener of our podcast. So.
Yes, Amy or you as
Clearly.
a regular listener.
Yeah.
But I've met her a number of times,
Yeah.
and I think
She's like, "Aren't you that weird guy that wrote me?"
you're the one who I couldn't
Like
get
30 times. Seriously,
Yes,
I get it.
Yes, okay.
We're
Y'all
just
had a
sorry.
similar story. Good deal. No, but she's very, very, very kind, and I shared with her a little bit of that, but just so it's alongside what you're saying, which is that to share your story is not just for you, but it is for you, but it's not just for you, but it's for others too, to hear the works of faith that God has. We have to learn from, we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, is what the scripture says. And so if we're surrounded by a great cloud
We
of
should let 'em speak.
witnesses, they've witnessed
We should let them
something.
witness.
Yeah.
Right.
And so let them witness. Let them witness.
Yeah, I like that because it's real easy to read one person's story and go, "Well, okay, that's great for you.
Yeah.
How do I know you weren't high? How do I
Right,
know you
exactly.
weren't? How do you know you're not crazy?"
Delusional.
But when you get,
Right. This
The
accumulation
witnesses.
of-
The witnesses, the
Right.
great cloud of witnesses, suddenly it's a lot harder
yeah,
to
Right.
just dismiss.
Right.
Yep.
Because you're saying this has happened across time on people from different places in different ways, and they've come up with the same
Right.
result.
Right.
You know, like the same.
And the story will speak to different people.
yeah.
And that's what I hope for. It'll be relatable to this guy because that was similar to his world.
Yes.
Or this woman because it happened to her. That's what I want. And where they have that 16-minute moment and they made that decision. I don't want to live my life this way anymore. Or, oh, that's what God was telling me he wants me to do.
Right.
That's my mission with the story.
That's great. That's great. Turning, and I think what it also is just a ministry in the sense of really the word minister. It's to support the trial or distress that others go through, and show them that there can even be a greater purpose and a reason and a treasure at the end of the adventure. And because there's people who could have your story, and they could say at the end of their story, even with everything, they could say at the end of the story, I'm not for a God who would let me go through all that.
Because if he were, why would I have gone through it?
Why would I have gone through it?
Yeah.
And he must not love me. And your story goes, no. In fact, I know his love more now.
Right, right.
And
It
so
reminds
yeah.
me. Did you hear John Lennox's take on the problem of evil? He went through it recently with he's that young British guy who's an agnostic. He's been doing a lot of videos online where he interviews people. I can't think of his name, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Cool guy though. I really love the way he, is curious.
Right.
But Lennox was his guest, and he was talking about, because the guy said, he's like, really where I get stuck is the evil.
Yes.
And he's like, since the beginning,
Since the
that's
beginning.
been the challenge. And he didn't give the typical apologetic answers, the ones that we got pre-programmed and we're ready for.
Right.
John Lennox said, in math, because he's a mathematician, he said in mathematics, when we work on equations that haven't been solved in centuries,
Yeah.
and nobody's been able to solve them. And in mathematics, when we run into that problem, what we often say is maybe we're asking the wrong question. And he said, maybe the question should be, do we have a God that understands suffering and understands goodness, understands good and understands evil, and understands what it means to suffer, because we do have a Lord that suffered for us. And
Yes.
and kind of, like that's to me, that's where I find my comfort.
Yeah.
Is that there's not, the man on the cloud, beard, it's
Right.
far away from me.
Far
Is
away.
that God is with me, and when I am
It's come
suffering,
close.
God is closest to me.
Yes.
That's important and powerful.
I hate to bring it back to the Israelites in the wilderness.
Yeah, no, this
I'm preaching on that this weekend.
Oh,
That's part
okay.
of why
All
it's
right, well,
all
that's
on
good.
the
That's
forefront of my
good.
mind. But one of the things they would say is when they would grumble, they would say, and is God with us or not?
So I wrestled with that.
Yeah.
Because I preached not on that, but I brought that up recently.
that
is why the Israelites were so quick. Like Moses is gone for 40 days, and they're
Right.
like, "That's it. We need a new God.
Let's get a new one."
Yeah, and
Right.
but I started thinking about it. I said, how easy would it be for the Israelites to think that it was Moses,
Right.
that God was doing this because of Moses, and with Moses gone, well, maybe we don't have God anymore.
No, right.
And so they put their faith. I'm not trying
And
to.
they put their faith in their circumstance.
Yes.
Like, so if I am struggling, they went 3 days without water. You brought us out of Egypt for us to just die in the desert. At least we could. There we had pots of meat and all this sort of stuff. God, even when so God provides water from a rock. They get water. Like they get manna from heaven when they're hungry. They haven't had food. They're like, we're gonna die. They get manna from heaven. But what ends up happening is they get the manna, they keep eating the manna, they get tired of it. And they're like, no, we don't like this manna anymore. We want meat. And so God says, all right, I'm going to send you meat.
Here's these little birds.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Have fun. And so he sends them meat. And like every step of the way God provided, it was in a wilderness.
Yeah.
It was not in a paradise.
Right.
And that's because the paradise is one day. Where we are now is the wilderness. And so we have to be prepared to see the message that God has for us is that I will provide despite the wilderness. And I think that that's what your story, like to me, that's what it screams. God will provide even despite the wilderness. So thank you for being on with us.
Thank you very much for the invite. I
Yeah.
hope it's an inspiration
Oh, it is.
between
I already
the
know
three
it
of
is.
us. For
Well, I've
others.
enjoyed it.
I
So,
have enjoyed it too.
Whatever the listeners, I enjoyed it. And that's all that matters.
Yeah, exactly.
And I hope you get some help with your whole memory thing.
I appreciate that. What were we talking about?
So you want me to pray?
Yeah.
All right, let's pray. Father, I just want to thank you, first of all, for Cynthia and all that you've done in her life, for the gift you've given her, not just, Lord, of deliverance from her struggle, but the acknowledgement that there was something gained,
Yes.
even in the midst of distress, peril, everything. Father, you have told us that those things come into our life to prove the genuineness of our faith, which is greater than gold, because gold can perish being refined by the fire, but our faith can't. And so, Lord, I just want to pray for anybody who's listening to us today, who has a testimony and has an act of faith that God has done in their life, that they would begin to witness and to tell others about it, so that we would be surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. We are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. But would the witnesses just speak up?
Mm.
Lord, all you've asked is for us to give what you've put in our hands. And so would you continue to let us do that through your strength, through your will, through your wisdom. We love you and we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for listening to Let the Bible Speak. If you'd like to support us, subscribe to the podcast by clicking that little plus symbol on your phone until it becomes a check mark. You can also share these episodes with a friend. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at letthebiblespeakpodcast@gmail.com. If you write us at letthebiblespeak@gmail.com, we will not receive your email, so make sure it is letthebiblespeakpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks.